Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Jeffrey Epstein and the Interlochen School. We know he had property there. We know he was invited to the campus several times. And we know that at least one girl says that she was abused by Jeffrey Epstein via his connection with her through Interlochen School. Well, today, we have a new article out that's adding a little bit of context, a little bit more meat to the bone. So let's jump into this article from The Sun and see what else they have learned. Headline: Pulling Strings. How Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell built a lair to target girls at top school after flying in violinist for gig. This article was authored by James Beal and Hugo Daniel. The Sun Online can reveal the extraordinary details of how the pedophile and his girlfriend managed to have the Jeffrey Epstein Scholarship Lodge built at the Interlochen Academy of Arts in Michigan. And, we've heard a little bit about this, right? We've read a couple more articles, but it's always good when we can add some context and a little more meat to that bone, because in this case especially, context is so important. It helps us avoid innuendo. It helps us avoid all sorts of nonsense, right? So I think that it's very important that whenever we can add context to one of these situations by adding more information, that it's important that we do that and make sure the catalog is updated. And again, when we read all of these articles, we always stumble upon a couple of little nuggets of gold, right? Even if it's a topic we've covered almost ad nauseum, it always seems like we find a little nugget of gold in all of these articles. But this situation here with Interlochen, is crucial considering all of the claims and the allegations line up with what happened here at Interlochen. So I think this is a crucial part of the story, and I think it's important that we add this context whenever we can. The lodge on the campus of the famous boarding school has come under increased scrutiny after claims he and Maxwell used it as a base to target underage girls. That's pretty damning, huh? Imagine being the officials at Interlochen who gave Jeffrey Epstein the okay to build this cabin, and him and the bipedal serpent Ghislaine Maxwell are posted up in there eating hot Takis and hot Cheetos, looking for young girls to abuse? In what world is any of that okay? Certainly not in a world I want to live in, folks. I don't think anybody like Jeffrey Epstein, I know this goes without saying, right? I don't think anybody like Jeffrey Epstein should be anywhere near a school, never mind having a cabin on that property. And furthermore, do any of these schools hold any responsibility for what happened to their charges under their care? I know if I send my kid to school, again, I am not a parent, so I'm just obviously speculating here, but I know if I had kids and I sent them to school, I would expect them to be looked after and kept safe. And I would expect there to be a stringent process for vetting people who are around my children. Meanwhile, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell have a base on the property so that it's easier for them to target girls. The school said it cut ties with Epstein in 2007 after his child sex conviction. Yeah, after, huh? Because nobody knew anything before then. Nobody had any clue what was going on. If you walked into Jeffrey Epstein's house, you'd be the one who would be crazy if you thought something weird was going on with all the half-dressed girls, the pictures, the weird shit in the bathrooms. Just normal behavior, folks. Keep it moving. In an exclusive chat, Tim Ambrose, formerly Vice President of Institutional Advancement at Interlochen, recalled how Epstein and Maxwell would fly in on his jet for weekends. So remember, We heard previously that Jeffrey Epstein was only there once, or maybe twice, something like that. But now we're hearing from Mr. Tim Ambrose, who was the vice president of institutional advancement at Interlochen, that Epstein and the bipedal serpent would fly in on his jet for weekends. What were they doing? They were there to enjoy the sounds of the High School Musical. We all know what they were doing. And I wouldn't be shocked if other people that were involved knew as well. Like, how about the pilots that flew them there? Them dudes knew what was up, right? They knew what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. Can't they be held accountable for being an accessory or something? My point is, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, they didn't do this on their own. Their actions were facilitated and enabled by basically an army of people. And that whole entire army of people must answer for their role. He said the idea for the lodge came up after the billionaire pedophile offered to fly Israeli-American violinist Perlman up from New York to play a concert at the school in the early 1990s. So there's no Delta flights leaving from New York or Palm Beach or wherever to go to Michigan? What's with all of these rich people thinking that they have to get a private jet to fly somewhere? I'm so tired of them. I'm just so tired of that whole entire part of segment of society, right? The so-called polite society that's been thumbing their nose down at us since forever. Well, guess what? As much as we sicken you, you sicken us. You bunch of sick bastards. Ambrose said, we were looking for someone to transport Itzhak Perlman. Epstein said, I'd be happy to fly Mr. Perlman on my private plane. So we flew Mr. Perlman in for his performance that day. It was very helpful. Yeah, I'm very helpful. You guys can't come up with the money to buy the dude a first-class ticket? You have Jeffrey Epstein ferrying your violinist to your high school? And then you have the audacity to say it was very helpful? I don't even know what to say about any of that. I mean, I don't know. We have a huge outdoor theater, and over the course of a summer, Interlochen will have 40 to 50 performances by people like Perlman, Yo-Yo Ma, Natalie Cole, the Beach Boys, very big names. Jeffrey and Ghislaine flew in as well for the concert. Oh, I'm sure they did. I mean, you know, Jeffrey's not going to miss a chance to Google at some young ladies, and I'm sure Ghislaine is running around like her hair's on fire chasing down nubiles. The whole entire thing is so distorted and sickening, folks. Here's a match, get the gasoline can, let's light it all on fire, because this sort of shit has no place on our planet. Epstein's extravagant favor for the musician proved to be a catalyst for discussions about building a cabin on the campus. So that's all it takes, huh? That's all it takes. You can fly a violinist in, and then all of a sudden, you're magically in discussions to build a cabin on the campus. Must be nice. The world-renowned violinist contracted polio as a child and gets around with the aid of crutches or a scooter. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I'm not familiar with the violinist, but that's something, huh? Gets around with the aids of crutches or a scooter, and you could still play the violin that well? Gotta give some props for that. Ambrose told the Sun Online, we did not have a suitable facility for Mr. Perlman to stay at that was handicap accessible. Epstein said he was interested in helping build a place for people to stay when they are on campus. I got an architect and had them draw some plans, but I got a call from Jeffrey and he said, I don't want that. He said, I want to build a log cabin and I want it all handicap accessible so when Mr. Perlman comes, he is comfortable. Ah, so there's the in, folks. There's Jeffrey Epstein's foot in the door. I want to do this for Mr. Perlman. Since he's crippled and he can't walk, I want to make sure we have a proper facility for Mr. Perlman here on property. So, in my great grandeur, I'm going to build you one. But not the one you want. I want to build a log cabin here. He said, I want to build a log cabin, and I want it all handicap accessible so when Mr. Perlman comes, he is comfortable. I want a walk-in tub. I want countertops that are handicap accessible. So I got an architect and we came up with something. Epstein approved of the new design and sent a check for up to $300,000 and $400,000 at the time for it to be built. So Jeffrey Epstein uses this violinist's handicap as his in to build this property so that him and Ghislaine can hunt for nubiles on this campus. What sort of sick and distorted human being formulates a plan and a plot like this? You know how devious you have to be to come up with shit like this? You have to be straight up evil. I'm talking Reagan, right? Reagan being infected by that devil, that demon in The Exorcist evil. This is just beyond the pale, folks. Beyond the pale. Perlman, 75, then stayed at the lodge many times when he came to perform at the school throughout the 90s, Ambrose said. The violinist was one of many rich and famous names listed in Epstein's Little Black Book, but has never been accused of or associated with any of Epstein's wrongdoing. I have never heard of this gentleman, this violinist, being involved in any sort of wrongdoing. But again, he's on the list, right? He's in that book, so that means he has to be looked at. If you're in that book of Jeffrey Epstein's, that black book, at the very least, it deserves further investigation. He wasn't widely known as an associate of Epstein until his name came up in a documentary last month where it was claimed he was one of 6 men invited to the billionaire's 40th bash. Asked how many times he remembered Epstein and Maxwell coming, Ambrose said, "I probably remember 3, maybe 4 times altogether." So that's more times than we've heard originally, right? And again, like I was saying, we always find a little nugget in these articles when we go to add some context, and there you have it. 3 or maybe 4 times. I'm guessing more than that. But we'll go with 3 or maybe 4 times, and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt that it was just that many times. But if he has that cabin there, and he has the ability to have a fertile, quote-unquote, hunting ground for him and Ghislaine Maxwell, well, why would he not go there? A couple of times before the cabin was built, and then maybe twice afterwards in the summertime, they would fly in on his jet, spend the weekend, and then usually leave on Sunday morning. The fundraising executive recalled how all correspondence regarding the cabin went through Maxwell. Of course it did. Of course it did. You know, I've read recently about the interview with Juan Alessi and how he was talking about how Maxwell said she hated Epstein, blah, 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 blah. And honestly, I buy that, right? Because I've never bought the fact that they were in love and they were lovebirds. They were brought together by certain powers to enact this blackmail scheme. It had nothing to do with love, in my opinion. Now, I might be completely off, right? Maybe they were deeply, madly in love, and I'm just missing the boat on it. But from where I'm sitting and from what we have learned thus far and from the conversations that I have had, there is zero chance that there was love the way you and I would think about love. This was a business arrangement with a specific goal in mind. He added, "When I made decisions about the cabin, I always had to go through Ghislaine to get to Jeffrey. She was his gatekeeper, his major domo. My sense, she was like his lieutenant. She would screen his calls, she would do his bidding, take care of business, and basically do whatever Jeffrey asked. Well, she would do that because she understood that was her role. She understood that her role was to facilitate this sort of thing. And she was good at it. She understood how to properly maneuver. She understood what levers to pull. And she most certainly was accepted by the highest of the highest class in so-called polite society. And now they all can't run fast enough away from her. She was an integral part of the process, very businesslike, very matter-of-fact, a little bit stiff. I never saw her lose her temper, but she was firm and very demanding in terms of what Jeffrey wanted and how he wanted it. There was no equivocation with her. She had an air about her that made her command attention. It made you want to get it right for him. You didn't want to make her angry. And that, again, goes into what we've heard from the survivors about Ghislaine Maxwell, right? They always said you didn't want to make her mad. She was capable of great evil. You don't want to make her mad. And we're hearing it again here from Mr. Ambrose. Asked if he thinks it's possible students were abused in the Epstein Lodge, Ambrose said, "I would think not. But again, how would you know?" And that's the scary part, right? We don't know. Ambrose would say, "I would think not," but how do we know for sure? With Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and this whole entire sex ring, there's so many unknowns that until we can, cross something off and say, all right, this did not occur, zero chance, then it has to be up for discussion at this point. Because if you would have told me when I first started looking into this case that it was going to be this crazy, I would have told you were a liar. Honestly, I wouldn't have believed it. Unless I seen all of this for myself, I wouldn't have believed any of this, to tell you the truth. I mean, the basic tenets of it, right? But the way the media reported on this case, the way the legacy media was reporting on it, they made it just seem like it was just another, trafficking situation. There's some sick guy had a few girls he was trafficking. It's basically what they were trying to tell us. When in reality, it was an international sex trafficking ring wrapped into a money laundering operation, flipped into a blackmail operation, and a bow put on top of it. So how can we trust anything that the legacy media is trying to pump to us? School fundraisers. Ambrose said Epstein first got in touch with the Interlochen Alumni Association in 1990 and was soon hosting fundraisers for the school at his opulent Madison Avenue office in New York. He donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to Interlochen between 1990 and 2003, bankrolling the construction of the Epstein Lodge in 1994. A school newsletter article from the Times said the lodge was located near a junior girls' camp on the campus. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right? It was located near a junior girls' camp on the campus. And Mr. Ambrose, maybe we should rethink that whole did girls get abused at that lodge? Because with him being so close to this girls' junior campus and how him and Ghislaine Maxwell had become professionals with the whole procuring and grooming process, I would not be shocked if there are other survivors that attended this school. Ambrose said Epstein and Maxwell would stay in it when they visited to watch performances in the summer, when the boarding school becomes a 6-week arts camp for children aged 8 to 18. Ugh, even grosser. Aged 8 to 18. So most of the people that were there, you would guess, are underage kids. 8 to 18. We know that Jeffrey Epstein, according to the rumors, liked them young. So this is right in his wheelhouse. This is exactly what he was looking for. He explained Interlochen felt indebted to Epstein after he paid for the cabin. Of course they did. That's how these guys always get their hooks in, right? Their money, their charity, their this, their that, this, the other thing. But in reality, all they want is access to these little girls. And if it cost Jeffrey Epstein $500, $1 million to have that access, what is money to this scumbag? Nothing. Information is worth way more than money to people like Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein Lodge. Interlochen was listed as Michigan home and Epstein Lodge in the financier, pedophile's famous Little Black Book. It is one of America's most expensive private schools. Since Epstein's arrest and then suicide, allegedly, in custody last year, 2 former students have alleged they were groomed on Interlochen's campus while attending summer camp there. So there you go, at least 2. Okay? At least 2. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say before this is all said and done, we have more girls who come forward who say they were abused at Interlochen. And I think Interlochen needs to stand tall before the wagon. If I was a parent or I was one of these kids who was abused and I was now an adult, I would sue them as well for not protecting me. One Californian woman, identified as Jane Doe in a lawsuit filed in January, said she was a 13-year-old camper when she was first approached by Epstein and Maxwell in 1994. The court papers also claim Epstein introduced her to Donald Trump when she was 14 years old and said, "This is a good one, right?" To which the president smiled and nodded in agreement. The allegations in Doe's lawsuit are similar to those in Maxwell's criminal indictment, which says in 1994, Maxwell and Epstein took a minor to the movies and on shopping trips. So again, this is what I'm talking about with the parallels between the charges that Maxwell is facing right now and this story. Same time frame, Interlochen, etc., etc. They arranged her travel to New York and Florida, where she was abused by Epstein and Maxwell, prosecutors say. In court filings last week, the U.S. Justice Department requested Jane Doe's lawsuit be immediately stayed because of a factual overlap between the civil and criminal cases. The case has now been postponed until Maxwell's criminal proceedings are completed. And we talked about that as well. The criminal case is taking precedent here, and the civil case has been put on hold until we get to a conclusion in the criminal one. Cellist claims. South African cellist Melissa Solomon also told a podcast last year how she was allegedly approached by the couple at a wishing well on campus aged 14 in 1997. Miss Solomon claims she spent 6 years in Epstein and Maxwell's orbit, but was not abused by them. Instead, Epstein paid for her tuition at Interlochen and then at Juilliard School in New York before they fell out when she refused to recruit fellow students. And you see how it works, right? Even if you don't accept the abuse, even if you don't accept being abused by Epstein yourself, like we saw with Haley Robson, and we see with Melissa Solomon here, your job was then to go get other girls to bring to Jeffrey Epstein. And Miss Solomon wasn't having it, and they had a falling out after that. She also says she declined the meeting Maxwell had set up for her with Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew has denied all wrongdoing associated with Epstein and Maxwell. So this little girl had a meeting set up with Prince Andrew via Maxwell, huh? Wow. Anybody who doesn't think Prince Andrew needs to stand tall before the wagon in this story must be suffering from CTE after a serious head injury. Ambrose, who worked at Interlochen from 1990 to 2000, claims no one was aware Epstein and Maxwell were approaching students while on campus. He said, "Oh, heavens no. If we knew anything or even had an inkling, he would not have been welcomed back." Oh, that's nice. He just wouldn't have been welcomed back, huh? That's all you would have done? You're kicked out of here? You can't come back anymore? That's probably it, right? You know how these people like to keep shit in-house? These weird-ass people? Here's an idea. If you had an inkling of a clue, instead of him being welcomed back, how about calling the authorities? Ambrose added, "I feel really duped. I feel hurt. We certainly wouldn't have accepted any contribution knowing anything about him that we know now. It's unbelievable and so sad and really tragic." Yeah, what's tragic is that all of these institutes are so easily bamboozled and swayed by a couple of bags full of dough. A couple of bags full of money are way more important than protecting your students. Makes sense. Today, Interlochen's website says, Interlochen takes the safety of students very seriously. Interlochen employs numerous security and safety professionals, many of whom have law enforcement experience. So what does that mean? We've seen the way the FBI conducts themselves. That's supposed to make us confident? Oh, ex-law enforcement, so that's great. That they must be great people then. No. I don't even know what that means. It's like all of these places that were involved with Epstein, they've just moved on, right? They haven't been held accountable for anything that they were involved in. They haven't had to answer any serious or hard questions. And then they have the audacity to talk about their security protocols around campus. Yeah, those worked out well, you bunch of doofuses. The Academy has previously said Epstein was permitted to use the lodge for up to 2 weeks per year, but its only record of him staying at the lodge was for a week in August of 2000. So, again, that doesn't jive right away with what Mr. Ambrose is telling us. So, they obviously fiddled with the logbooks, just like all the rest of these rich people do. What, you're telling me the person in charge of the log can't be slipped a few grand, a $5,000 handshake? Of course it's possible. In a message to parents on its website, current President Trey Davy said, "We have no record of any complaint ever made about Epstein at Interlochen. It was and remains our policy that he would not have been permitted unsupervised access to students." The cabin was renamed the Green Lake Lodge and is still available to rent. I mean, really? How can you even make that statement, Mr. Davy? Were you there? Were you with Epstein 24 hours, 7 days a week? If he was always under adult supervision, how is he approaching girls at the wishing well, you dumbass? Maxwell has denied any involvement in Epstein's sex trafficking and has pleaded not guilty to 4 criminal charges related to child sex trafficking and 2 counts of perjury. Her trial is set for July 2021. The Sun Online has contacted Itzhak Perlman and the Interlochen Academy of the Arts for comment. Well, I would not hold your breath waiting for that. We all know that these institutions, the Academy of Art in New York, Interlochen, and a bunch of others, really have no desire to help out, right? All they're trying to do is save face and refurbish their images. When the reality of the situation is, people expected their children to be safe at these properties, on these facilities, at these camps, and at school. And these properties and these schools and these camps, they failed in their duty. If you'd like to contact me, you could do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, everybody, I'll be back later on and we will pick up the conversation then. I hope you all have a great day.